Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our latest STEMtastic pop-up session. You're joining us tonight for a mini beast safari with Marty Jopson. If you have any questions during the session for Marty, then pop them in the chat box, which you'll find in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, and he'll do his best to answer them during the session. Now, that just leaves me to introduce you to Marty and to leave you in his very capable hands. Hello, Marty.
My name is Marty Jopson. Just zoom in. It's amazing. Look at that beautiful detail on it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my kitchen table, actually. My name is Marty Jopson, and I will be taking you on a mini beast safari, a microscopic safari, by which I mean a safari, so a tour of lots of very, very little things, very little animals, in fact. So, as I say, this is my kitchen table, at least, and these are microscopes. Now, microscopes are special pieces of kit. They're a little bit like telescopes, which are used for looking at very, very far away things that are very, very small and making them seem big. Stars, obviously, whereas these are used for looking at very, very close things that are very small and making them big. So let's go down to the table and I'll introduce you to some mini beasts. Here we go. So I do that and I come down here. See, I've got a second camera right there, so you get a closer view of me. Right, let me just check that everything's running smoothly. Yes, good, good, good. Right, so first of all, let's jump straight in. I'm just going to take this out of my ear because I don't need that at the moment. Let's jump straight in to something very, very small. And what I'm going to show you is disgusting and gross and vile. Are you ready for gross, vile disgustingness? And it's underneath this microscope here. So I'm just going to make sure it's all, yep, it's all good to go. So are you ready for this? Gross, vile and disgusting. Here it is. Boom! And I'm still up in the corner. There you go. Now this little creature, what is that? And these are not pictures I took before. This is happening all right now. I mean, I'm up in Yorkshire. You guys are down in Suffolk, but I'm up in Yorkshire. And this is all there. See, look, if I nudge it, the whole thing wobbles. And this thing is about 1.5 millimeters long. It's a type of creature. And its proper name, its science name, is Pediculous Humanist Capitis. Now, that's Latin, which is the language that the Romans spoke. And you might think, well, why do scientists use Latin? Nobody speaks that, and that's the point. That's actually why they do it. It's so that nobody understands. No. It's so that everybody understands, because everybody has to learn the name from scratch. Because if I told you what this was in German or French or Welsh or Russian, you wouldn't understand. Once you know that it's Pediculous Humanist Capitis, everything falls into place. But actually, it has a common name. The common name for this is the head louse. Oh yes, this is one of my head lice. And yes, you're thinking, oh yuck, head lice. But here's the thing. First of all, head lice. Most people get head lice. 2/3 of school children will at some point have head lice. Okay, so most people get head lice. They are super easy to catch from another person that's got head lice. They move around classrooms really quickly. And this beastie here, I am clean, I should point out now. These locks do not have head lice in them anymore. Oh no, I am clean. And these head lice came from my hair, though, some years ago. This is very dead. In fact, one of my children, I won't say which, came home from school and, oh dear, scritchy, scritchy head. They've got head lice. So we got all the combs and the lotions out. Anyway, we dealt with them. And then obviously you have to comb yourself. So I combed myself and I had head lice as well. And I was really excited because it meant I could put them under the microscope and I could have a look at them. So this is a female head louse, I can tell by the shape of it. And what I want you to look at is this bit here. Can you see that there? There is a hooked claw. Okay, and the sort of the black stringy bit sticking out, that's just a tiny bit of fluff that's got caught on it. But there's a hooked claw, and you can see there's one on that leg as well. And in fact, it's got 6 legs six legs, and every leg has one of these hooked claws. And those hooked claws are specially adapted. They have evolved so that they hook over the human hair, just human hairs, and just the hairs on your head as well, not hairs anywhere else. Okay, so they don't go on dog hairs or cat hairs, just human hairs, because these guys only live on human heads. And what they do is they snuggle right down into the scalp, right next to the skin, and then when it's nice and quiet, you're not combing them, they have a little nibble of your scalp and you bleed a little bit, and then they eat the blood. That's what they eat. They're a bit like mosquitoes, but they don't fly, they just crawl around. And then what happens, and I've got in here, because I can zoom out, okay, so I can zoom right out. Over here, there's another weird thing that I found in my hair. That is what's known as a nit. That is the egg that is laid by the female that I showed you. In fact, that female, because I only found one on my head. Literally, I found one head louse, and she laid that egg. Okay, and then that little strip there, that stalk, so to speak, at the bottom, is actually a bit of my hair. And that egg was laid and stuck to the hair so tightly that when I combed it out, it broke the hair rather than broke the glue. And then what happens is, look, oh, actually I found one here. Look, I found this in my hair. There's a tiny little baby head louse. Oh, look at it, isn't it sweet? Oh, look at that little baby head louse. That would have hatched out a few days before I combed them out and grown up, and then I would have ended up with one of the big mummy head lice in another one in my head. And that would have then led to all sorts of itchiness. But anyway, so that's a gross and disgusting thing. I want to point out to you, by the way, that the reason why her backside, the bottom bit, because this is her head here with the antennae, and this is the bum here, this is the backside. The reason why that bit is dark like that and not the same color as the rest is because that's where its last meal is. The last time it ate, obviously it ate some of my blood. So inside there's a little bit of my blood that's still there. It's all dried out now. Anyway, let's move on to something a little bit different. I'm going to cover that over and push that out of the way. So I've got here on the table here, oops, I'll do that and I'll do that. I've got here, there's another camera here so I can show you what's on the table. Some specimens, and we're going to go through these specimens. This is the safari. We'll see what we find. Now, the first thing in my safari is underneath this bit of cardboard here. Doesn't really like being in the light. You might be able to see what it is already. Let's get it underneath the microscope. So I'll come back to this. Now, I'm going to just get it under the microscope. Where are you? There you are. I'm going to turn that light down. I'm going to turn that light on, and then I'm going to focus on this creature here, and then I'm going to show you what this is. Here we go. Pow. Oh yeah, look at that. Now this is obviously a spider, and the name of the spider is Tenegaria domestica, which is the common house spider, and it's alive. Ah! This one is very much alive. I found this, there's some bricks down the side of my house, and I always manage to find a spider lurking in those bricks. Look at it, isn't she beautiful? It's a she, I can tell you that. And let's count the legs on a spider. How many legs do spiders have? I hear you even from Yorkshire shouting out 8. So let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. No, that can't be right. Let's do that again properly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you're thinking spiders have 8 legs. Yes, they do have 8 legs, but they also have 2 extra limbs that you could call, I guess you could call them arms almost. So it's got 8 legs, but it's also got these 2 little arms at the front. And there you can see them there at the front. This spider is behaving very well. I always ask for a name. When I get a spider, I always name it. And I just happened to ask my wife what I should call this spider. She doesn't like spiders. She said you should call it Squishy. That's her policy with spiders. I can't go any further than that. Anyway, so Squishy here has these 2 extra arms, and they're pedipalps is what they're called. And the why she has them is so that when she catches her prey, and what she does is she's a hunting spider. She weaves a loose web, something falls into it, and then she rushes out, grabs it, bites it, and then has to wrap it in the silk, so the sort of the spider web. She wraps it all up in spider web, and she does that using these two pedipalps here, okay, to maneuver it. Because imagine you had legs this long that were stuck out like that. It'd be really difficult to maneuver it. I want to show you one other thing. She's being quite well behaved. She doesn't like the bright lights, but if we zoom in on her head, look at the hairs on the pedipalps. Oh, but look at that. That is the spider's head, and those are her eyes. She has 8 eyes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 eyes. I'm just looking here. I've got questions coming in. I'll come to that question in a second. So yes, the spider has 8 eyes, and they're all pointing forwards. And the reason they all point forwards is because she's a hunter. I've already said that's what she does. She runs out, she catches her prey, so she has to look forwards. We've only got 2 eyes as well, notice. Or rather, our eyes all point forwards, both of them, okay? But animals that are prey animals, things like rabbits and pigeons, have eyes at the side so they can look behind them as well, so they can see if anything's creeping up on them. I've got a question here. Why do lice only go into human hair? That's what they have evolved to do. There are different lice creatures that live on different types of animals. So there are lice that would live on dogs and on horses and on goats and on rabbits, and each type of creature will have its own type of head lice, so to speak. But we call them head lice because they only live on a hair, because that's where we've got most of our hair. Anyway, right, Squishy is being very well behaved. So we shall move on from Squishy. I'm going to put Squishy over here. Let's put it there. And I'm going to cover it up with this bit of cardboard, which is, yes, from some cereal packets. And I've got another creature here, which I want to show you. Now, this creature is much easier to handle because it tends not to run around so easily. There you go. And what we're going to do is we're going to show you that. And that is, of course, it's a woodlouse. Look at that. Fantastic woodlouse. Now, the woodlice, there's actually 20 different types of woodlice in this country alone. And they are quite difficult to tell apart. Some of them, and they're alive, these two, they don't move much. Again, they don't like the bright lights. And they will get upset by the fact that I've stuck them under the bright lights, and they're off, boom, they're off. But so I have to talk quickly whilst they're still there. So these woodlice, the only way you can tell them from other types of woodlice, and this is called the common shiny woodlouse, the only way you can tell them from the common rough woodlouse, is by looking at them under a microscope. What you're looking for is the antenna here, and you have to count the number of bits in the antenna. And when you count the number of bits in the antenna, that tells you whether they're the common shiny or the common rough. So the microscopes are really useful, and not just for looking at spiders and scaring people. Ah, it's a huge spider. But also, oh, that one's escaped. Get back in. There we go. One of them did a runner for it. Not so fast. Yeah, so the only way you can tell them apart is under the microscope. Right, let's move on to look at something else. Cover them up and put them in the dark so that they don't get upset with me. And then later on, just so you want to know, oh, I've got more questions coming in. Can they see colour? Why are spiders hairy? Can spiders see colour? Good question. Don't know the answer to that. Possibly some of them can, probably not. They probably see in black and white. Why are spiders hairy? Mostly, there's 2 functions. Same function as our hair, keeps us warm. Second function of hairs on a spider is it allows them to feel things on their pedipalps. The reason why their pedipalps are all hairy like that is so that when they put them on their web, and then if the web moves, they feel it through the hairs sticking out. So they're kind of like, it's kind of like fingertips almost. Okay, I must try and keep an eye on that, on the questions there. Right, let's go to something else. Let's go to another type of sample. So far, these have been really big things that you could find in any garden, okay? But it's fun to look at them up close. If we want to look at something really small, though, we have to maybe look in different places. Now, I'm lucky enough to have a pond in my garden. Now, I dug the pond myself. I put it in myself specifically so I could do what I'm about to do now, which is show you the things that live in ponds, because ponds are usually full of life, even at this time of the year. In fact, at all times of the year, you can find some crazy things in ponds. So let's go to the microscope, and I'll just get this set here, and then I'll show you what I can see. There you go. So here am I. So here's a little bit of pond water. So what you can see here, sort of washing around, these things here, okay, these things here are, this is pond weed or duckweed as it's sometimes known, and each one of these is one plant. Okay, so let's see if I can, it's quite difficult to separate them. So there, can you see 3 little leaves there? That's one plant. It's literally, it's just 3 leaves and they float on the surface, and these kind of green things sticking down, these are the roots. Okay, but if you just look carefully at the water, there's a bit of grit in there that I picked up, a bit of sand. But if I focus down, because like a camera, I focus the microscope. And if we watch carefully, you might see a few things moving around in there. Oh, I can see a few things moving around. It takes a bit of practice getting used to it. And if I zoom in a little bit, okay, and focus again, you start to see more and more stuff in there. Can you see there's a weird little creature just there that's moving, and there are other moving things in there. Now, what I've done is so that we can see these a bit better, I fished out, literally all I did was I took a little squirty, where is it? I took one of these little jobs, which is just a little pipette thing, little squeezy pipette, and I went to the pond and I just went, and I sucked some water up and I squirted it into there, and then I brought it back in to see what it is. So I fished out a few things that might be of interest. So let's have a look at them. And I've got them in separate little dishes. Okay, so I've got these tiny little dishes here. So I'm going to put that under there. And what I'm going to do is I'm also going to change the way we can look at things by looking at it with light from the side, and that makes a big difference. And suddenly you're thinking, oh, it's all gone black. And yes, it has gone black. And that's because I'm shining the light in at a weird angle. But what the important thing is, can you see the wriggly wrigglers in here, the wriggly tigglers? Can you see there's all sorts of little blobs wiggling about in there? There's all sorts of things flying around in there. And in fact, if you just sit and watch this image for a second, it's absolutely teeming with things that are alive. There are little white blobs that fly around. If I zoom in a little bit though, oh, look, there's a big one. There's a big one. I'll turn the brightness down. Oh, it's gone. Let's see if I can find it again. There they are. Look, can you see these? These are crazy little creatures. This thing here, you see that thing there? Okay. That's just there, it's just over there. Okay, that thing, and I'm going to zoom in on it a little bit. Is it going to stay still? I have to focus, focus, focus. There, look, you can just see it right on the edge of the picture, right over there. Oh, it's gone, it's moving, it's gone off the screen. That thing is a creature. Oh, look, there's one that's eating here, and that actually will keep it still. Can you see? There it is. That thing is a crazy little creature called a no, hang on. An ostracod. I have to get the right one. An ostracod. And ostracods are, they're very strange creatures. They're actually related to woodlice. And woodlice themselves are related to crabs and prawns. So it's a type of what's known as a crustacea. But as I zoom in on this, can you see that even these, can you see there's some tiny, all these tiny little green dots that are moving around. Can you see these? The whole screen is full of green dots, and it's quite difficult to get them to stay still. There's one there. There's one that's sort of immediately below me that's not moving. But can you see all these little green specks that are flying around? These are individual creatures that are moving around. And the thing is, most creatures are made up of lots and lots of what are known as cells. So you, for example, are made up of a lot of cells. In fact, you are made up of 30 trillion cells, and a cell is just kind of like a bag of goo, and basically what you are made up of is 30 trillion of these bags of goo stuck together, and each one of them is tiny, 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 teeny. Now, small creatures obviously have less cells in them, The creatures you can see here that are moving around, the really tiny ones, are just one cell big. These little specks of green that are moving around slowly are just one cell big. And my pond is absolutely full of them. And it's perfectly healthy. They're really good to have in your pond. Okay, right. Let's move on to another creature from my pond. Now this creature, though, this is a terrifying beast. At least it would be if it was anything other than about 1 millimeter long. It's tiny, tiny, tiny. But if it was anything more than that, it would be quite terrifying. It's a very simple little creature. Here it is. Let's zoom in on it. Let's show you that on the screen. There it is. Oh, look at that. That's sweet. Oops. There it is. This creature is called a Hydra, which you'll, for those of you who know about Greek mythology, is one of the Greek monsters. Now the Hydra, somebody's asking, are the moving things in the pond alive? Yes, very much so. These are living creatures. Everything is alive. All of these things are alive. They're living creatures, even though they're only one cell big. Now the Hydra is another tiny little living creature. It's about 1 millimeter long, as I say. It's got a head that's here. There's its head. There's its bum. And its bum is just attached to the bottom of the little glass dish that I've got. And then it's going off the edge of the screen, but it's got all these, it didn't like, it was unhappy when I did that. And it's pulled all its tentacles in. It has these tentacles that it sticks out. And there are a few amazing things that I can tell you about the Hydra. Okay, 3 amazing things. The first amazing thing is that this thing is related to jellyfish. And do you remember in Finding Nemo, you had Finding Nemo, you had the clownfish, and they lived in an anemone, right? Okay, which had lots of tentacles, and they lived in that. It's related to those. It's also related to jellyfish. And the reason that one thing that joins all of these creatures together is the fact that they are covered in stinging cells all over their tentacles. And the stinging cells have deadly poison in them. And the sting itself, when it sting shoots out, it's kind of like a harpoon. Okay, it sort of shoots out, it injects deadly neurotoxins into, and in fact it eats these other tiny little things that are flying around inside here, this water. That's the first cool thing about them. The second cool thing about them is that these guys are nearly immortal as far as we're sure. They don't die of old age. They just keep going. And they keep having little babies. They don't get really big. I mean, they never get bigger than about 1 millimeter. And when they have a baby, it just sort of pops out the side. It forms at the side until it's fully grown and then just drops off. And then there's another one. And they just keep growing and keep growing. As long as you keep feeding them and they don't kind of get squished, they'll keep living. And the other really cool thing about them is if you chop one in half, both halves will grow and become a new Hydra. Now, some people think you can do this to earthworms, and they say, oh, if you chop an earthworm in half, you get 2 earthworms. This is not true. If you chop an earthworm in half, you kill the earthworm. It's very simple. Do not go around chopping earthworms in half thinking that you are doubling the number of earthworms. You're just killing earthworms. But you can with these. I'm not going to do it because that seems a little bit cruel, but actually they survive perfectly well. There's a few questions in here. I'm going to try, and if I answer the questions, anything I've not answered, I will try and go back to and answer later. But are hydras always green? No, they're not always green. This one is, oh, look, it's moved its foot. This one is green because it's full of green algae that it's brought in. What does it eat? Well, do you remember I showed you that weird little ostracod, which I said was related to the woodlice? They eat them. I've seen one eating it. I'm going to give this hydra a bit of a poke just to show you what happens when it's up, when it gets disturbed. So I'll give it a bit of a poke, boop, 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 like that. You see how it kind of, it pulls all its tentacles in and it shrinks right back down in defense, because obviously it can still be eaten by. Now, some people worry, is this Does this mean that it's dangerous to us? Not at all. These things, you know, their sting would never harm us. It's far too feeble to harm a human. We're far too big. Our skin is far too thick. So don't worry about them. They're not going to do you any harm. Why does it have so many tentacles? It waves the tentacles around in the air like this. In fact, normally what it does is it hangs from the bottom of the duckweed called duckweed because ducks eat it, hangs underneath the duckweed, sticks its tentacles in the water and just sort of dangles them out like this. And then as stuff kind of swims past, they brush against the tentacles and it just grabs them and pulls them in and eats them. Okay, so there is the craziest creature you're likely to find inside a pond, and they're super common in ponds. Right, it seems to be all right. It's doing what the way it moves, the way it walks, the way if it has to move from one place to another, what it does is it kind of sticks its bum down, it puts its head right out, and then it grabs onto the ground with its tentacles, and then it lets go with its bum and it flips itself over, and that's what it's doing. It's sort of walking across the little dish. I'm going to put it away now, for now, and then later on I'll take it back out and I'll chuck it back in the pond so it can live its life in the pond. Now, the way we're going to run this is I'm going to try and answer questions as we go along. I'll keep talking for about 45 minutes, so we'll keep going. So we start at 1:30, so about 1:15, maybe a bit longer, depending on how things go. And then if you've got any more questions, that's probably the best time to hit me with questions that I haven't answered. If something's not been answered, just ask me again. Are they the only things in ponds that can regrow? Somebody is asking. Now, actually, being able to, if you're cutting something in half and for having it regrow into two is super rare in animals, in living things. Most times, if you cut something in half, you kill it. Very, very few creatures can do this. There's a couple and there's two of them that you can get in one. One's called a flatworm, a planaria, and the other's the Hydra. And both of those can do it. And it's super, super rare, only in very, very simple creatures like the Hydra, which is very simple type of creature. Right, so far what I've shown you has been actually quite big stuff. So this safari has so far focused on, you know, big stuff and it's animals. But what I want to show you is the biggest sample I've got with me. And the reason it's the biggest thing I've got with me is because it's actually a plant or a piece of a plant. Here it is. I'm going to put it under here. I'm going to focus on it and then I'm going to show you. And let's see, do that. If people can get what it is. Okay. So here's a little bit of plant, and I'm going to zoom right in so that we can almost see the individual plant cells. There it is. It's green. It's a plant. Yes, it's a piece of plant. It's a piece of leaf that I've zoomed right into it. And just put that there. And you can see. Can you see how this bit here? Imagine just take this bit here. Can you see how it kind of looks all bubbly, 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 as if it was like made of a sort of a froth? And that's because each cell is sort of a tiny little blob and full of green, and all of those cells packed together, they make it almost look like a sort of a froth, and every single one of those tiny little dots is a single cell. So they're really, really small. Too small really to see with this microscope, but we'll see some cells later. But what kind of plant is this? It's a super common plant, Urtica Dioica it's called. Let me move to a different part of the plant and you'll guess immediately what it is. Or at least I think you'll guess. Here you go. This is the stem of the plant. And it's covered in hairs because plants are hairy. They're very hairy. Got a few questions here about other things from pond. Do hydras ever die? But only if you squish them. They're immortal, remember. They won't die of old age. Can they live out of the water? No, if they dry out, they die. Then they do die. And what's your favourite pond animal? The Hydra, no question. It's super cool. Right, so here we are back on the plant. Super hairy. Here, look, you can see some of the hairs here. Okay, plants are hairy. In fact, if you go out and look at most plants in your garden, a lot of plants are hairy. If you look at the underside of, say, a hazel leaf, or in fact, lots of leaves, the undersides are all hairy. And you think, why are plants hairy? Same reason I'm hairy, keeps me warm. In winter, same reason your dog is hairy, keeps it warm. And this plant, though, has special hairs on it, and here's one of them. Okay, and you can see there's quite a few of these. There's a few back. There's one there. There's one there, there's another one just at the bottom. In fact, there's one here and there's one here. And these hairs aren't really big, and they've got this sharp pointed needle sticking out of it. And that needle is a very special structure, and it is super sharp. That needle is wickedly sharp. Okay, I've got here a little needle on a stick, okay, so I can poke things when I'm sort of manipulating things. And this needle is as sharp as a sewing needle. You can't really see it, it's too small. And if I poke my finger with it, it would just go straight in. If I compare that to this, I'm going to try and do this. This is actually quite difficult. I'm going to try and reach in and get the needle in the same place as, can you see? There's the tip of the needle. And can you see how blunt the needle is compared to that thing? So this is as sharp as a, sorry. What have I done with it? It's scooched right over here. Hold on, let's pull it back down. Just proving that this is real happening right now. Oh, okay, there you go. So there's my needle, okay? And there's that thing. So this is as sharp as a sewing needle, as sharp, this needle that I've got, this metal needle here that I'm wiggling about, this thing is as sharp as a hypodermic needle that they use to give you an injection or a vaccine. And yet, did you see how much sharper that thing is? Okay, these are incredibly sharp. And as soon as you brush against this, which is a stinging nettle, of course, this stinging nettle needle goes straight into your skin. It pierces your skin. And then what happens is at the bottom here, there's some sort of liquid that gets squirted into you, because this is like a hypodermic needle. It's like the needle they use to give you an injection with. It's hollow. And the liquid is pushed into your flesh. You inject yourself. The plant doesn't do anything. You inject the liquid into yourself by squashing against it. And that liquid contains all sorts of things, including an acid. And you know that acids hurt if you get them under your skin or into your eye, because if you're eating an orange and the bit of orange kind of squirts you in the eye, oh, it really stings. Or if you get vinegar on a cut or something like that, it really, really stings. Same thing happens when this stuff gets under your skin. It really hurts. That's why it hurts. And it swells up as well. And you get what's known as a nettle rash, which is those bumps caused by these tiny little needles. Right, okay. I like to show people a bit of plant. There you go, you can see. And you can see how many of these there are on this. And this is just completely ordinary. I can show you, here's a bit more stem, and you can see there are these sharp needles all over it. There are also, some people say there are no stings on the leaves. If I show you this bit of leaf here, you will see that there are plenty of stings on the leaves. I'll show you that. Can you see? This is the surface of the leaf. There's one of the stinging cells. There's another stinging cell. And as I look down, there's one. Ooh, there's one just there as well. So the surface of the leaf has these stings on them, as well as all the other bits of the leaf. So, you know, if anyone says that leaves on stinging nettles don't sting, they do. Right, okay, let's move on from that microscope. I'm going to put that back down there, because what I want to show you now is something really small. We've talked about cells and how everything in your body and all living things are made up of cells. Sometimes only a few, sometimes just one, but sometimes 30 trillion, which is how many cells are in me. Now, 30 trillion, that's a very big number. That's 30 million. So that's 3, 0, and then 12 more zeros, which is probably the biggest number that I can sort of be bothered to write down, at least. So let me show you an individual cell, and I'm going to show you a cell from me. Now, I've already talked about this substance with reference to the head lice, because I'm going to show you some blood. Right, let's go back to the desk camera. Here we are. So I've got this thing here. This is what's known as a glass slide. Okay, it's a thin piece of glass, right? And I've got this thing here, which is a device for it. What it does is it shoots a little needle out of the end here, right? And people who have diabetes use this to take their blood samples. So I'm going to use that to draw just a tiny amount of blood so that we can see if we, and there you go, look, blood. I'm bleeding for you, for your entertainment. You don't get that very often, trust me. So I'm going to put the blood onto this glass slide, like this. And then I need a tissue because I don't want to bleed on everything. And whilst I'm just staunching, and I'm just going to hold that whilst that happens. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a second glass slide, and I'm going to use that to smear out the blood so that we can put it under the microscope. So I do this, and then I just go whoop, like that. And then you can sort of see it's smeared out, yeah? And now what I need to do is wait a little while for that to dry, and that's beginning to dry nicely. So I'm going to put it underneath this microscope here. Now, I've got two microscopes here. Oops, wrong button. I want to go on that button. Too many buttons, too many cameras. So this microscope here is good for seeing relatively big things. You can put big things underneath it, you can put whole plants underneath it. This microscope only works with very thin, very flat things. It's a bit more difficult to use this microscope. So I'm going to see if I can find what I need to find. Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? There you are. Okay, good, 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 good. We have some blood. Ooh, it's not very good though. I'll be honest, this wasn't the best blood smear. Where am I? Ah, okay, I found what I want to find. Here we go. Right, let's zoom in on that a little bit. Right, are you ready to see some blood? Blood, show me the blood. Here we go. This is it. Here is the blood. Ooh, no, it isn't. There it is, the blood. There is the blood. This is it. This is human blood. This is what it looks like. I just bled from my finger, put it onto that glass slide, put it onto there, and that's what it looks like. And each one of those little blobs is a red blood cell. And you're thinking, they're not very red, Marty. And that's true, they're not. But that's because red blood cells aren't very red. They're only a very tiny bit red. But when you put millions and millions of them, and I just bled millions and millions of red blood cells onto a slide, that's what you see. Now, that looks pretty good. Those red blood cells, okay, we can, I'm just looking at the time. Yeah, we've got time to do this. I'm going to try and show you red blood cells a bit better. Now, those red blood cells are actually super teeny tiny. They are, in fact, only 0.008 of a millimeter across. So you take a millimeter and you divide it into 1,000 parts. I'm just putting some gloves on. And then that's how big each of those blood cells are. And they're just these little red blobs, these little, well, ever so slightly pinky blobs. When you look down the microscope, down the actual lens, you can sort of see that it's ever so slightly pinky. But what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to show you more detail on that blood by colouring the blood in. And I've got here, I get this in the right place, some special chemicals. They're quite unpleasant chemicals, which is why I'm wearing gloves. And I'm going to dunk this slide into those chemicals, and that will colour in the blood cells for us. So I'm going to do this one first, and I go in that way around because I'm running out of this chemical. And I go in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like that. And then we're going to go into the next chemical, which is this this pinky red one. That goes in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then just drain that one off. And what I'm doing is it's a bit like colouring by numbers, because the different chemicals go to different parts of the cell, because the cells aren't just blobs. There is stuff inside each cell. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right. Now, once that's draining off, I'm just going to move them out of the way so I don't spill them, because that would be very bad news. And then I'm going to wash off the excess stuff that's on there, like that. Washing off some of the blood that didn't get smeared out, but I've still got plenty there. Really good wash. put that over there too. And then get another tissue and just get rid of some of the excess liquid, like that. And then I need to just give this a quick huff of breath to try and blow some of the excess water off. So excuse me, like that. And then that should be okay. Right, so let's put this. You can see there's still some blood there. I've washed some of it off, but the important bit is there is still some there. So I'm going to go back into the microscope. Let me go back to this and see if I can see what I want to see. Good, good, good. Actually, this is pretty good, what I'm seeing. Right, let's show you this. Boom, there you go. And now the cells look more like blood, don't they? You sort of think blood is going to be pink. Well, now it's pink. But the only reason it's pink is because I coloured it in pink. But you can actually see another type of cell there, a type of cell that was invisible until I used those special chemicals to colour it in. There is a white blood cell. Okay, and white blood cells are really important because white blood cells are what keep us healthy. They are part of what's known as your immune system. And your immune system, super important. It's what protects us from germs, from viruses, and from bacteria. Viruses and bacteria, which are what cause diseases. And it's these little fellas here, okay, which are called white blood cells. They go around and hoover up all the things that aren't supposed to be there. So yes, that includes viruses and stuff like that could cause COVID-19, which we're all far too familiar with. What is the white dot in the middle of the blood cell? Okay, so blood cells aren't just circles. They're not balls. They're actually sort of flattened balls. They're kind of more like a donut that's got a little thin bit in the middle. So it's not sort of a donut with a hole, but in the middle, there's a very thin bit. So what you're seeing, these ones here, for example, okay, there's a little bit of the color, the little bit of the paint that I put in, the chemical is stuck underneath in that little dimple. Okay, so what you're seeing is the actual shape of the red blood cell. Good question though. Right, okay, so I've shown you some individual cells. Can we see things that are smaller? Yes, we can. We can go even smaller yet. And the way we're going to do that is I'm going to have to show you some other types of cells. I'm going to show you some cheek cells from myself. And we do this by putting some water. I'm going to put some water on a slide there. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some cells from the inside of my cheek, just going to rub them off onto this sort of cotton bud thing here, because what I'm hoping I can find is that stuck to some of those cells, just putting some water on it, stuck to some of those cells will be some bacteria, and bacteria are way smaller than cells. They are individual cells themselves. I'm going to tip this up. So you've got two pictures of me. Hello, hello. This goes in my mouth. Boom, there you go. Got some cells. That goes back down there like that. And then I squidge that about on there like that. Squidgy, squidgy, squidgy. Okay. Somebody's asking, how many cells in your body? 30 trillion. So that's 30 million cells. I take a tiny piece of glass, cover slip it's called, that goes on there like that. I squish it flat. Why do we have so many cells? Because we're so big. If we were bigger, we'd have more. If we were smaller, we'd have fewer, because they're very, very small cells. And then I'm going to put that under here. Oops, let's go back to this picture. So you can, if I go to the wide shot, you can actually see what I'm doing. So I'm putting this under the microscope, and then I'm going to have a look and see if, oops, I need to open that. Okay, yep, got some cells. Good, good, good. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to see if I can find some bacteria. Not yet. It's quite difficult, because the thing is, this microscope that I've got, you can't keep seeing smaller and smaller things. Eventually, you get to the point where you have to say, okay, the things I'm looking for are too small to be seen with this got one. Got some. Got it. Result. Let's have a look. Which button am I pressing? I'm pressing that button, and I press that button. Right. Let me explain what you are saying. This weird kind of collapsed thing, it looks like a collapsed football, and that's because that's basically what it is. It's a cell that I scraped off the inside of my mouth, and it's now underneath the microscope. Okay. Now this cell is about. This is the same dimensions as those red blood cells. So a red blood cell it's about twice the size of a red blood cell. So it's 16 thousandths of a millimeter across. Think about that. There's a millimeter. This is 16 thousandths of that. And can you see? There's a few things you can see here. We don't need to go into them because I'm already after beyond mid-time. But can you see here where I'm holding up? There are some tiny little dots. There's a little black sausage there, right in the middle. Can you see that? And there's a little dot there, and there's another little black sausage there. Those are Streptococcus mutans, which is a kind of bacteria. Now, sometimes you find a lot more. If I looked around for longer, I'm sure I could find more, but I don't have time. Those are the bacteria in your mouth that cause tooth decay. That's why you brush your teeth. You brush your teeth to knock these bacteria off. There, it's a bit better focus. You can see there's a few just there, just in the middle where my sort of spot is. Those things are all over the inside of your mouth. And on your teeth, you don't want them on your teeth, certainly not for very long, which is why we brush our teeth. If they're on the cells, it doesn't matter. They don't do any harm on the cells. And those things are super tiny. They are less than 1/1000th of a millimeter across. They are like 1/10,000th of a millimeter across, or something like that. Okay, we are talking super tiny. 1/1000th of a millimeter, by the way, for the science nerds out there, is what you call a micrometer. So you have millimeters, and then you have micrometers, which are 1/1000th of a millimeter, and we are now talking nanometers in size. Okay, they are in the nanometer range. They are millionths of a millimeter across, and they are super tiny. They're one cell big. So cells can be very different shapes. So you've got a very big human cell there, a very small bacterial cell. Right, there you go. I have taken you on a safari, hopefully, from great big spiders. Well, the spider wasn't that big. The spider was about 1.5 centimeters across, all the way down to the smallest things you can see with a microscope like this, which are bacteria. And then before you ask, viruses, which is what caused COVID-19, is much smaller still. And you cannot see them with this kind of microscope. You need a very special type of microscope that would be sort of the size of this room, quite frankly. So, okay, that's all the time I've got. I'm just going to have a quick slurp of coffee. Let's go back to the main picture here so I can answer some questions. So if you've got questions, what you need to do now, any questions about anything I've shown you about me or anything I do, put them in the chat window, and there should be a button somewhere at the bottom which will have a chat, and you get somebody, if you can't type, get somebody else to do it for you, get one of your parents to do it for you, and then I shall try and answer them. So let's have a little look at what questions we've got, and we'll do about 10 minutes of questions. How many cells in the body? I've said that already, 30 trillion. Why are bacteria so small? Good question. Why are they small? Well, why are we the size we are? Why am I this big and not bigger? Well, I mean, because I didn't grow any bigger. But why am I not twice the size or 3 times the size? Why am I not the size of an elephant? It's because that's how we have evolved. So how different creatures have evolved. We have grown into, as it were, over millions of years to fit the space in the environment that we live in. So some creatures are very small. Ants, very small. Spiders, relatively small, bit bigger. The really teeny tiny things, even smaller. And that's because that's where they live. They live and they fit where they live. So the cells are the size they need to be so that they can live in the places where they want to live. And bacteria, they're actually super ancient type of cells that have been around on this planet for far longer than human beings or spiders or plants or anything else. In fact, they came way before us, and they started out super tiny, and then only as things got more and more complicated did they get bigger and bigger and bigger. How big can they grow? There's a question there. How big can cells grow? Well, I showed you some different types of cells, and I showed you the red blood cells were quite a lot smaller than, if I put them on the same size, you'd see that my cheek cells are about twice the size of the red blood cells. But there are cells in your brain that go from here all the way down to your feet. Right? Actually, it doesn't quite go that far, but there are cells that are at least 1 meter long. Now they're super, super skinny, but they are 1 meter long. So they're 1 meter in that direction and like a fraction of a thousandth of a millimeter in that direction. So they're really, really long. And some cells can be, you know, really big. So if you think about a giraffe would have some really monster cells that go from, let's say, its backbone all the way down to the tips of its hooves. I guess it has. Okay, so you know, different cells doing different jobs can be different sizes, and we are made of all sorts of different things, different types of cells. What are they made of? Really complicated. They're made of a sort of a complex goo of chemicals and different types of things. They're made of proteins mostly, but also all sorts of complicated chemicals in there, and there's a whole field of science called cell biology. So obviously this is biology, the study of living things, but there is a subject called cell biology, which you will find out about as you go further on in school, which is just about cells and things, because what goes on inside a cell is absolutely critical to our understanding of how bigger things work. So it's all well and good knowing that you've got a head and arms, but if you don't know what those are made of, then you don't really understand how they work. Okay, what are cells made of? How cells can they grow? What is the strongest vaccine? Oh, that's a good question. So that's talking, obviously, very topical question. We're all talking about vaccines and disease and stuff like that at the moment. So we're fighting. This is the reason I'm sat here and I'm not down there in Suffolk with you, because of the horrible COVID-19 disease. So what makes the strongest vaccine? So I showed you some white blood cells, or one white blood cell. There's loads of them in my blood is full of white blood cells. I've got literally, how many blood cells have I got? Probably not 1 trillion, but probably not far short of 1 trillion cells in my blood. Okay, and a big proportion of those will be white blood cells. And what a vaccine does is it gets your white blood cells to think that you are being attacked by the virus. Okay, the virus is trying to give you COVID-19. So it fools you into thinking that's happened. And the result is that you then become immune, so that when the virus does, you do meet the virus, you kind of go, ha ha, I know you, you're a virus, and you squish it straight away. So what makes the best vaccines depends on the virus. Some viruses are very easy to make vaccines for, some viruses less so. Some diseases we've eliminated from the world because we had a really good vaccine. There was a horrible disease many years ago called smallpox. It's gone, completely gone from the world, because we used vaccines to get rid of it. Fantastically powerful bit of science. Are woodlouse hairy? Not really. If you look at the underside of a woodlouse, they don't like staying on their back. They're really upset because they've got all this armor on the surface. But if you turn them over, they tend not to be hairy. Think about a crab. Crabs have got slightly hairy bits here and there. So it's not really, because they live underwater, the hairs are less useful. Not really. Do I love my job? Yes, I do. I think this is the best thing in the world. And anybody that can do a job that they enjoy is onto a winner. So I really enjoy doing this. It's great fun. I'm quite passionate about microscopes, as you can tell. What's the most poisonous insect? No, hang on. Does spider hairs help it grip? Not really. They've got some interesting hairs at the very tips of their foot. And the point of those hairs is to stop them sticking to their own webs. So they use those hairs to sort of balance on their webs without sticking to it. And then other insects blunder into the web and get stuck to it, whereas they can then move around on them because they've got these special hairs on the end of the thing. So in some respects, it's quite the opposite, in fact. The hairs stop them sticking and make them sort of allow them to move around on a sticky thing. So, so not give them grip. What's the most poisonous insect? It's difficult because there's a saying that the poison is in the dose. Some things are super poisonous. The poison in the Hydra is super deadly, but it has such a tiny amount that it's never going to poison anything bigger than one of these tiny little creatures that it meets. Okay, if you could get enough of that poison, it would be super deadly, which is why I'm saying Hydra would be terrifying. If it was this big, it would be like, ah, run away. So it depends on the dose. So if you're talking about that, then it's probably, as in to humans, what is the most deadly insect to a human? It's not an insect. It's probably a spider of some description, one of the very deadly spiders. There are a whole pile of them: the funnel web spider, the black widow spider. One of those is probably the most dangerous to the human because they have a lot of poison and they inject a lot of very nasty poison in when they bite you. What does coronavirus look like under a microscope? Well, okay, I've already said that coronavirus, it's a virus. It's way too small to look at under this microscope. I could not, you just can't see it. It's too small. You need a much more powerful microscope. And I have looked at coronavirus under a microscope. And I'm not going to show you that. I mean, if you go, because what you can do is if you go to my website, which is my YouTube channel, which is there, it's very simple. It's just my name. You go to YouTube and you put my name, or you send me a tweet. You can see some video I did where I did look at some coronavirus under a special type of microscope called a scanning electron microscope that doesn't even use light particles. It uses electrons. And this, if you understand that, good for you. You're a science nerd like me. It's super, super hard to see. And even then, with the best microscope, and this was a microscope that costs about 60, was it 60 or was it 600,000? I can't remember. It was a very big amount of money. It's like £600,000 worth of microscope. And I got to use this thing just to look at coronavirus. It's amazing. And you can just about see it. What was the first bacteria ever discovered? I think it was something called Lactobacillus. It was a bacteria that caused the first time. Well, it depends what you mean by discovered. They saw when they first started looking under microscopes. There was a guy called Leeuwenhoek in about 1670 who had this weird little microscope. It was tiny, and he kind of held it up to his eye like that, and he saw in a drop of pond water all this sort of crazy stuff whizzing around, just like I showed you. And he went, "Whoa, that wasn't bacteria." He then went on and looked at other things, and eventually we think he saw bacteria wiggling around, because some of them do wiggle about. He had no idea what he was looking at, and in fact people didn't really understand what he was looking at until much later. And it was only much later when there's a guy called Pasteur realized that bacteria were what caused food to go off usually, and he realized that that's one of the first bacteria that we really learned about, and that we could say, yes, that's a bacteria, we know what it does, and it's called Lactobacillus, which is the strongest bacteria. Strong in what respect? I mean, bacteria, yeah, they don't do anything. They're just tiny little blobs, and some of them are really horrible. Some bacteria create horrible, nasty toxins. There's one, what's it called? Oh, I can't remember. I'm just thinking, it'll come to me. It'll come to me. There's some bacteria. There's one that you get in, if you keep rice that's been cooked for too long, out of the fridge, for example. You should never do this. It sometimes grows in that, and you can get it in other types of food, which produces horrible toxins that will make you very, very sick. There are other bacteria, disease-causing bacteria. You get cholera or something like that. You can get cholera, you get a sore throat. All of these bacteria can cause deadly diseases. So those are strong bacteria in so much as they do something that is quite nasty. But obviously bacteria don't have muscles. They're too small, because muscles are made of many cells all put together. So, and they are just one cell. Right, I think we have come to the end. I think I've answered all the questions that have been posted. I hope you enjoyed that. Yeah, I think I've done all the questions. I'm going to say goodbye now. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Marty Jopson. Remember, if you want more microscope videos, go and have a look at my YouTube channel. There's the link. Or follow me on Twitter or something like that. I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you very much. You've been a great audience. Bye-bye.